Often regarded as the best film in the Rambo series, First Blood turned Sylvester Stallone into an icon of the 80s, going from a sensitive boxer to a total badass hero. Blending a powerful political statement on war with a show of strength and survival skills, we'll dive into the story behind First Blood, from its early stages to its release in theaters. You'll see that this film had to fight its own battle to make it onto the big screen. The story of First Blood goes back to 1972 with the release of the novel by David Morrell, a former university English teacher. He wrote First Blood as a tribute to some of his students who had served in Vietnam. The war, which lasted from 1955 to 1975, was fought between the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, supported by the Soviets, and the Republic of Vietnam, backed by the US, which sent over 500,000 soldiers to the region. Morrell wrote this novel to show his support for the American veterans who were suffering from PTSD and from the lack of recognition they faced when they returned home. The book tells essentially the same story as the film, but with several differences. For instance, Rambo is described as a long-haired young man with a beard, a violent man who does not hesitate to kill the men chasing him in Morrell's novel. The story also ends differently, with both Sheriff Teasel and Rambo dying, the latter being shot in the head by Colonel Samuel Troutman. Interestingly, in the book, Rambo isn't named John, he's simply called Rambo, and his name actually comes from the Rambo apple, an apple grown in the US that David Morrell found delicious and whose name he thought sounded powerful. To shape his main character, the author drew inspiration from Audie Murphy, a World War II hero known for holding off hundreds of enemy soldiers using a mounted machine gun, much like Rambo does in the fourth film. First Blood was published in 1972, and that same year Columbia Pictures bought the film rights, appointing Richard Brooks as the director. Brooks initially planned for Rambo to die at the end of the movie. However, that idea never came through, as the project was abandoned because of the ongoing Vietnam War. That's when Warner Bros. Stepped in and acquired the film rights, aiming to cast actors such as Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Paul Newman, or even Clint Eastwood as Rambo. At that point, the studio was even considering making Colonel Troutman the film's main antagonist. After yet another cancellation and one more change of director, Carolco Pictures finally bought the film rights from Warner Bros. In 1981 and appointed Ted Kotcheff as director. Kotcheff offered the role of Rambo to Hollywood's rising star Sylvester Stallone. With the success of the first 3 Rocky films, Stallone accepted the offer over a single weekend and rewrote parts of the script to make Rambo a more human character and to make sure he survived at the end. An alternate ending was still filmed to honor the original story, in which Rambo commits suicide.
Blow the shit out of it. Blow the shit out of it. Blow the shit out of it.
With the final script approved and the cast in place, the film was granted a budget of $15 million and began shooting on November 15, 1981 in British Columbia in southeastern Canada. The production proved to be very challenging and suffered major delays, largely due to the weather, but even more so because of Stallone's repeated injuries, as he performed 75% of his own stunts. His most serious injury occurred during the 4th take of the cliff jump scene, when Stallone severely hurt his back and broke several ribs. In this scene, Stallone actually broke the nose of Sheriff Lester, played by Alf Humphreys. That's why he appears injured later on in the film. Another unfortunate incident occurred at the start of filming. Around 50 of the film's firearms, worth about $50,000, were stolen. As a result, the Canadian Army had to take charge of security on set. In March 1982, once filming wrapped, the movie went through its first round of editing. The initial cut ran nearly 3.5 hours, which literally horrified Stallone. He was even ready to buy the film back from the studio just to destroy it, convinced that releasing it as it was would ruin his career. After a second edit, the film was finally brought down to 1.5 hours. It was also at that point that the original ending was replaced with the one where Rambo survives and turns himself in.
Sylvester Stallone. This time, he's fighting for his life. First Blood.
After a truly challenging journey, First Blood finally reached theaters, first in North America on October 22, 1982, and then gradually across the world in the months that followed. When it came out, reviews for First Blood were mixed. Some viewers felt the story lacked credibility, while others thought the ending didn't provide the right conclusion for Rambo. However, as the film rolled out globally, the few negative reviews gave way to largely positive ones, cementing First Blood as a cult classic.
I'm starting to dislike you.
First Blood takes place in December 1981 and follows John James Rambo, a former US Special Forces soldier and Vietnam War veteran. 6 years after his discharge, Rambo struggles to return to a normal life, drifting from town to town since coming back to the United States. While looking for an old friend who served with him in Vietnam, Rambo reaches Washington State, only to learn that his friend has died of cancer caused by Agent Orange, a chemical herbicide used by the US military in Vietnam to destroy the vegetation that Vietnamese soldiers used for cover during the war. Continuing on his journey, Rambo reaches the small town of Hope and is arrested by Sheriff Teasel, a Korean War veteran who doesn't want drifters in his town.
Now jump in. I'll make sure you head in the right direction.
Refusing to cooperate with the authorities, Rambo is thrown in jail and mistreated by Sergeant Galt, which brings back painful memories of his time in Vietnam. The cops don't know it yet, but they have just awakened the beast. Unaware that Rambo is a decorated war hero, Teasel's men chase him across town, eventually reaching the mountains surrounding Hope. Hunted like an animal, Rambo is forced to defend himself. In the struggle, he accidentally causes Galt to fall from his helicopter, killing him on the spot. The chase then takes a darker turn, escalating into a full-scale manhunt. Even though they found out Rambo's true identity, Teasel and his men still had no idea who they were really up against. Relying on his survival skills in hostile territory, Rambo, who was determined to stay alive, camouflages himself, sets traps throughout the forest, and takes down Teasel's men one by one before targeting the sheriff.
Don't push it, I'll give you a war you won't believe.
Shaken, Teasel retreats to town and calls in the National Guard to help him get Rambo. Massive manpower and resources are quickly mobilized to track down the fugitive. Despite the warnings of Colonel Troutman, Rambo's former commander and mentor, Teasel and the National Guard continue to hunt down the former Green Beret, who is hiding in an abandoned mine. After the mine is blown apart by rocket fire, Rambo manages to escape and hijacks an army truck, picking up an M60 machine gun in the process. Driven by a desire for revenge against Teasel, Rambo makes his way back to Hope as night falls. He detonates a gas station to create a diversion, then plunges the part of town where the police station is into darkness. Colonel Troutman urges Teasel to retreat, but the sheriff refuses and takes up position on the roof of the police station to shoot Rambo. However, Rambo spots Teasel on the rooftop and opens fire, seriously wounding him. As he's about to finish him off, Troutman stops him by reminding him that he is the last surviving member of his unit. Rambo then criticizes the American government before breaking down in tears as he recalls his traumatic experience in Vietnam. Brought back to reason by his colonel, Rambo finally surrenders to the authorities and agrees to face the consequences of his actions. First Blood is a well-crafted action film tailor-made for Sylvester Stallone, who becomes one with his character. The message of the movie is pretty straightforward. It criticizes the US for the massive failure the government brought upon itself by fighting in Vietnam. Rambo embodies an America that doesn't know how to take care of its own. He is the voice of all the broken soldiers returning from war, whom the government trained, used, and then abandoned without moral or financial support upon their return home. The law enforcement in the town of Hope symbolizes the inability of those in power to fulfill their responsibilities, because all Rambo ever needed was someone to talk to, and Colonel Troutman is the ideal character to witness the fate of these soldiers, as he in a way represents the audience. Just like us, he gradually realizes that in his America, if you make mistakes, you end up alone on the street.